Just these past few days, the spirits industry exploded. Not because some new whiskey won a double gold medal, but because two pieces of news landed like depth charges, rumbling through the entire business. Pernod Ricard, the company behind Absolut Vodka, Jameson and Glenlivet, and Sazerac, a direct competitor to Jack Daniel's, are both launching bids for Brown-Forman. In other words, the crown jewel of American whiskey, Jack Daniel's, might be getting a new owner. If you think this is just another ordinary corporate transaction, let me stop you right there. Brown-Forman is not just any distillery. It is an empire controlled by the Brown family for 150 years. Its portfolio includes not only Jack Daniel's, but also Woodford Reserve, Old Forester, and others. Jack Daniel's alone generates over $3 billion in annual sales, more than the total spirits exports of many countries. Now two giants are circling it. Would you rather see it bought by Pernod Ricard, letting the French teach you how to sip Tennessee whiskey gracefully? Or would you prefer Sazerac to take it over, with Ryan Reynolds making your ads? Or maybe the Brown family can resolve their internal differences and stay independent. Don't rush to choose. Let's first look at 3 shocking acquisition cases from history. Every single one of them might tell you Jack Daniel's final fate ahead of time. Let's go back to 1987. The American whiskey industry was going through a long, painful decline. Vodka was stealing the glasses of young people, and whiskey inventories were shrinking like the outgoing tide. Right then, Jim Beam, yes, the predecessor of the Beam Suntory you know today, made a puzzling move. It spent big money to acquire National Distillers, a company that held vast stocks of aged bourbon. But what Jim Beam really wanted was not those bourbons. It had its eye on a bunch of liqueurs called DeKuyper. In the 80s, peach-flavored, cream-flavored, cinnamon-flavored liqueurs were practically money printers. Young people in bars weren't drinking neat bourbon. They ordered sweet cream liqueur on the rocks. Jim Beam was envious of that market, so it bought the whole of National Distillers, and along with it took historic bourbon brands like Old Crow and Old Grandad. After the acquisition, management put 90% of their attention on DeKuyper. Bourbon? That was Grandpa's drink. Just keep it alive. And so Old Crow, which had once been among the top names in American whiskey, began a heartbreaking decline. The distillery changed, the recipe was tweaked, and age statements were quietly shortened. The worst part wasn't the changes themselves. It was that no one bothered to explain. What had Old Crow once been? In the late 1800s, it was recommended by doctors and served by presidents. Jack London drank it. Hemingway drank it. Within a few years of the acquisition, Old Crow was moved from the prime shelf space to the bottom shelf, its price cut again and again, and finally, it became a synonym for budget whiskey. A century-old brand, ruined in just 10 years. What does this case tell us? When the buyer's heart isn't in your core brand, but in some liqueur that comes along for the ride, your soul gets dismantled. If Pernod Ricard or Sazerac buys Jack Daniel's, but only wants to use its distribution network to sell their other products, Pernod has hundreds of brands, and Sazerac has a huge liqueur and spirits portfolio too. Could Jack Daniel's become the next Old Crow? This is not alarmist. It is already history. The second script is darker than the first. In 2000, one of the world's largest spirits empires, Seagram, began to fall apart. Not because it couldn't sell whiskey, not because its brands were outdated, because the controlling family, the Bronfmans, note that name, decided they didn't want to sell booze anymore. Old Bronfman had built Seagram from a small wine merchant into a giant spanning 4 continents, with brands like Absolut Vodka, Chivas Regal, and Martell Cognac. But the third generation felt that selling liquor was too provincial. They wanted something classier. They had their eyes on Universal Studios. So the family decided to sell off all of Seagram's spirits business, cash out, and march into Hollywood. Who were the buyers? Diageo and Pernod Ricard. The two giants joined forces and carved up Seagram. Diageo took Chivas and Absolut. Pernod took Martell. That deal still influences the global spirits map today. And what happened to the Bronfman family later? They lost a fortune at Universal, and eventually had to sell the film studio too. The spirits empire they had once built, it no longer had anything to do with them. The painful lesson here is that a family-controlled company, because the founders' descendants no longer love the industry, can be torn apart overnight. Today, Brown-Forman is still controlled by the Brown family, now into its fourth and fifth generations. If some of them decide that whiskey isn't cool enough anymore and they want to cash out to do something else, tech, real estate, then every glass of Jack Daniel's you and I drink today could become an item on an auction list. More critically, Diageo isn't in the current bidding rumors, but if Pernod and Sazerac join forces, they could perfectly replicate this Seagram model. You take the Tennessee whiskey, I'll take Woodford Reserve, and the rest of the brands get split by region and channel. Antitrust concerns? A carve-up solves them. Could Jack Daniel's be cut into pieces? Today's Pernod and Sazerac are yesterday's Diageo and Pernod. History never repeats, but it rhymes. By now you might be feeling hopeless. Are all acquisitions destructive? Hold on. The third script is the reverse. In 2014, Japan's Suntory bought the parent company of Jim Beam for a staggering $16 billion. At the time, everyone was laughing. What do the Japanese know about bourbon? Won't they turn it into a shochu? A decade later, look at that deal. It is one of the most successful acquisitions in whiskey history, bar none. What did Suntory do? Two things that shut the mouths of all the Western spirits giants. First, it didn't touch a single production line at Jim Beam. The facilities stayed the same. The distillers stayed the same. The water from the Kentucky River stayed the same. Second, and most important, it injected world-class product innovation and a global distribution network into the old company. You've heard of Little Book? It's a limited series created by the brilliant blender Freddie No with Suntory's support. Every edition gets flipped on the secondary market for multiple times its retail price. What about Legend? A bourbon finished in sake casks. This kind of cross-category experiment, before Suntory arrived, would never have been approved by Jim Beam's board. Suntory brought not just money, but a culture of, if you dare to think it, we dare to try it. At the same time, Suntory fully opened its distribution channels in Asia, Australia, and South America. Jim Beam's sales in those markets skyrocketed. Does being bought by a foreigner always mean disaster? Suntory proved the opposite. If your new owner respects your traditions and is willing to invest real money in R&D and distribution, then an acquisition can be a new beginning, not an ending. What does this mean for Jack Daniel's? Could either Sazerac or Pernod play the Suntory role? Sazerac itself started as a whiskey company, and its founder was an early fan of Jack Daniel's. If it buys Jack, will it take the long view like Suntory? Pernod has top-tier expertise in cognac and Scotch whiskey. It could help Jack open up European and African markets that haven't been fully penetrated. But Pernod's problem is that it has too many brands and a huge portfolio. Could Jack Daniel's become just another brand losing focus in that sprawling collection? That's the sword hanging over its head. There is one more possibility, hiding outside any news headline. The Brown family holds most of the voting shares in Brown-Forman. The family is not monolithic. Some branches love whiskey, other branches might want to cash out. Historically, the Browns have had internal friction many times, most recently in 2022 when a young fifth-generation family member sharply criticized the company's performance at a board meeting. So we cannot rule out this script. One branch of the family buys out the other, then takes the company private and returns it to full family control. What's the advantage? Brown-Forman would no longer have to watch Wall Street's mood every quarter. It could behave like those old-money European families and quietly make long-term investments. Aged whiskey can't be rushed anyway. The downside? If the internal power struggle spins out of control, it could turn into a prolonged legal war, which could be even more damaging than selling to an outside buyer. In 2018, Jack Daniel's faced a severe tariff crisis. The EU slapped a 25% tariff on American whiskey. If that kind of external shock hit during a period of internal chaos, even the strongest brand might not survive. Which of these four scripts will actually play out? I don't know right now. Nobody does. But one thing is certain. The spirits industry is going through a post-pandemic self-correction. Young people are drinking less alcohol by volume, but they're drinking better and paying more for it. Jack Daniel's, a super brand built on huge volume and wide distribution, needs to rethink its position. Brown-Forman's fate will be the bellwether for the entire industry. Whoever ends up as Jack Daniel's new owner, or if there is no new owner, I have only one request. Don't ruin that Tennessee whiskey that comes from the little distillery in Lynchburg and gets charcoal mellowed through sugar maple. It carries something far greater than $3 billion. All right, that's what we need to talk about concerning the acquisition. And as always, one last reminder. Drink safely. Responsible sipping is the romance of whiskey. And then my signature line. No matter how you drink it or what you mix it with, one thing never changes. Vodka sucks.